My name is Mike Brubaker. I'm going to present this morning about a platform we've developed. It's called the LEO Network. If there's one thing I hope you will take home with you today, it is that this is a platform that's available on the web. It's free. It's easy to use. You can start using it as soon as I get done talking this morning. And I hope you will. We've been developing this in Alaska for about the last 10 years, and I think it's getting to a point now that we're pretty happy with it, but the development continues. So my title is an online platform for collecting local observations of environmental change. But yesterday, Craig said something that made me want to change the title, so I've changed it to an online platform for collecting local observations of weird stuff, which is perfect. So LEO stands for Local Environmental Observer. And in that title, we're trying to emphasize that this is a platform, this is a network made for people. And the basic idea here is that people in the north, really people everywhere, have usually a special place. It might be a large area, it may be just a city park, but they visit that every day. Maybe they've been visiting it through their family for generations, and they're so familiar with that place, it's like family. And they can notice very subtle changes happening, and thus they're very good observers of change. The LEO network is located within our Center for Climate and Health, and that is a partnership between the Alaska Pacific University, located in Anchorage, Alaska, and the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. So what I thought I would do is start out with a 1-minute film. This is an infomercial that we made, but I think it does a pretty good job of capturing the purpose of the platform and basically how it functions in a fun way. And believe it or not, we do have the occasional tropical fish coming up to Alaska. And so it's been sort of like LEO for us is kind of like an advent calendar. We get a new message every day. It's always interesting. Sometimes it's very important for public health. This is one of my favorite images. I use this a lot in my presentations because I think what it does, from a little bit of the North American perspective, but I think it speaks to how unique the North is, and also how much we have in common, really more in the North with each other than we do with southern latitudes. It also speaks to some of the challenges that we face as far as low population, isolation, access to resources. But if you look a little closer, you see that where there may seem like there is virtually nobody, there's actually a lot of people in little communities. And this is what we have been trying to do with our platform, is provide a tool that no matter where you are or whether you have cell access or not, you will be able to share some of your knowledge and share your observations. And we think that's part of the solution to understanding how our environment is changing. Now, one of the first communities I ever went to was that little dot. It's almost very difficult to see, but it's on the far end of the Aleutian chain. And it's the village of Nikolsky. It's a Unungan village located on Umnak Island. It's probably one of the most remote communities anywhere, population 20. And you can see, I mean, as soon as I went here the first time, I was sold on doing rural environmental health work. And everything that community needs to really establish itself and sustain itself in that place really can be seen in this image. And that is, there's a lake right here, there's this stream that produces salmon throughout the summer. There's the ocean where it's great harvesting for seal and ocean fish. There's a rookery and there's a reef. Now, people have been living here on Umnak Island at this exact same location for over 6,000 years. And they have been caretakers of this creek which every summer gets blocked up, or late summer with the storms, early winter with driftwood and sand and things like that. So they really have a long-term sustainable relationship with this resource and with the salmon. But more so, they really taught me in Nikolsky how incredibly sensitive their own perception is of their environment and the kinds of changes that were occurring, from the temperature of the creek to the texture and the smell of the fish to what was happening with the weather, the timing. All of these things makes people in Nikolsky and many other communities excellent observers of change and excellent observers of their environment. So what we're interested in doing is collecting symptoms of how the environment is changing. Some of the symptoms can be observed by people like Charlene in the photo before. Some things require science to assist, like the levels of harmful algae that are accumulating in these blue mussels. And in some cases, we need help from using tools. This is Leo, but looking a little further upstream, so at neighboring communities, about what some of the emerging environmental issues are. And sometimes we have to work with technology and use remote sensing to try to understand what's happening as far as larger scale changes in the environment, such as this coccolithophore bloom that was happening this summer near just a little bit north and to the east of Nikolsky. So the idea that we've had is maybe if we approached communities in the Arctic a little bit more like the way we approach patients. And throughout the course of their life, we track what some of the symptoms are that they are sharing with their doctors. And we track the different kinds of medical specialists that they see. So for us, Leo Network is a little bit like the conversation that happened just before, when the doctor was first talking with the little girl and asking her how she was and whether she had any kind of issues that she wanted to share. And this is really getting into more, for us, this is more of the structured monitoring, taking tests, getting samples, and that's stuff we don't do in Leo Network. So the idea is if we can begin to collect by people who are local experts some of these symptoms of change, then we can add them into almost like a patient chart. In this case, this is for Shishmaref, showing what some of these significant symptoms of change are that they're experiencing in their environment. And then maybe we can begin to roll up these symptoms and look at different geographic range, different time frames, and see if there's some kind of pattern or trend that's developing that's important. So through doing this, we're beginning in Alaska with thousands of observations now to begin to develop a little bit of a profile of the types of vulnerabilities that are being experienced in this part of the world from climate change. So what I'd like to do in the next few minutes is tell you a little bit about how this platform works, maybe walk you through a little bit of a scenario. Also, talk about how it's being used to address environmental concerns. And also, in getting back to our topic here, having to do with burial sites, show you a couple of examples of how people are sharing observations about burial sites in rural Alaska. This is actually the village of St. Michael, and this is what they refer to as the Russian-era burial grounds. So Leo was developed by the Alaska Tribal Health System in 2012 as a strategy for gathering and sharing information about climate change and other drivers of environmental change. So we're really interested in this connection between how climate change is driving environmental impacts and is driving health effects. The primary goal is to share knowledge. Secondary goal is to help answer questions and connect people, especially local people, with resources and topic experts. The content is purely observational. It's not structured monitoring. We take a holistic rather than a topic-specific approach. So it's really up to the observation of the individual to decide what they want to share. It comes always from the community, and very rarely are we prompting for any kind of information in particular. It's based on social media, so the primary customer for us is the member, the individual, and they decide what goes up onto the platform. We welcome different knowledge systems and encourage that, especially between indigenous, scientific, and local knowledge. It's multilingual. We're trying to add more indigenous languages so that you can use the platform in your native language. And it's user-driven and meant to be user-friendly. So how do different groups of people use Leo Network? Well, if you're a community member, I think this is a good statement. It's a platform for sharing observations about significant environmental change as witnessed through specific events, which are symptoms, so to speak. A way to raise awareness about pressing concerns and to connect with topic experts to receive technical support. If you work in public health, like I do, it's a communication tool for engaging with communities, staying informed about emerging priorities, and providing environmental health consultations. And if you're a researcher or an agency, it's a surveillance system for receiving local updates on emerging issues, for identifying experts who have topic expertise they can assist you with, and research partners, potentially at the community level, for learning about local change and vulnerabilities, and for providing specific consultations. And I had all that nicely bolded, but I forgot to do that. So there it is. So we're going to dive a little bit into the platform right now. As I said, it's really, what it is a platform of, it's a platform of people. And so there is this sense of a directory. And when you go in, you open up a profile. Like I said, it's free. It takes about 5 minutes. You sort of say the things that you're interested in. And you also include what your sort of knowledge background is. It doesn't have to be just one thing, but we do ask, when it comes to environment, do you feel like your knowledge is primarily indigenous, local, or scientific, or is it a combination of all of these? There is currently 3,359 members. Here you can see sort of this knowledge breakout. And you can also see self-identified areas of expertise that people have put into the system. The number of communities, this is sort of the long-term trends. This is cumulative, so there's about over 750 communities now active in the system. And they're located, this is really, when we say communities, we mean members. So this is where people have actually developed a member profile and start to participate in the system. There are some areas that we don't have as much participation as we would like. For example, across northern Canada and in Russia. So hopefully in the future we might develop some better partnerships there as well. But we track that. So here, for example, is a map showing Leo communities in Canada. And the list is much longer. And sort of the weighted dots here showing us how many participants there are in each of these communities. And this is a drop-down menu in case you want to convert at the website into a different language. We have all of the Arctic languages primarily covered, but not all of the Arctic indigenous languages. And as far as the content in the system, there's really two types of content. There is observations about specific events that are added into the system. And then there's also observations, really articles about specific events that are in local newspapers. So local not only means local residents, but really means small local newspapers as well. We consider those as important data sources, and I'll show you why. So here, for example, this is an article that actually came out of the Anchorage Daily News. Barrow eroding coastline reveals human bones. This is a weird thing. And it's also a perfect Leo type of content because it's specific. There's a time, there's a location, someone witnessed an event that occurred. So if you are today reading through your favorite local newspaper, you can push share and you can go, or you can grab the URL. And then what you would do in Leo is you would click on here, news article, contribute news article. Whoops. And then it would bring up this screen. You would plug in your URL. The system would automatically migrate some information into the system. For example, the name of the publication, the author, and the publication date. And then it would ask you a few questions. And I'm not going to show you the whole pathway for a news article, but I'll show you the whole pathway in case you want to do your own observation. So why do we do your own observations? Well, the reason is, again, because there's just not that many newspapers. Or at least there's not that many newspapers up here. If we could do it just with local newspapers, that would be easy. But the wisdom, the knowledge, the experiences, the observations are coming from local residents primarily, and we wanted to provide a platform for them to share, almost in the same way that a newspaper would share. And so you would go up here in the platform. So submit your own observation, and it approaches it almost like a news article. So what's your headline? When did it occur? So just for the sake of example, I put that in there. Please describe your observation. So, and this is really where a lot of the most important local knowledge content goes in. Not only what's happening, but the so what. And so we do get a lot of sort of the problem statement, the background, hypothesis, what's happening in the broader environment, all those kinds of contributions come in here. You can add files or photos. So in this case, just grab that off of the my drive in my computer. And then it's going to ask you where it occurred. Now, if you're using the mobile app, it's going to automatically assume date and location based on GPS. But in this case, on the website, it gives you a little bit more options. So here you can plug in your current, whoops, sorry about that. You can plug in your current location. You can ask it to find a location near you. You can search for a place by name. You can enter coordinates, or you can just have a pin drop in the middle of the map and then zoom in and place it wherever you want. Now there's an important other feature that we added. I think it's especially important for local communities, and it's this general area or specific point. So if you don't want everyone to know where your favorite berry patch is, but your berry patch is not doing the things it normally would, you can make it a big general dot. But what you can see here is we have the lat long, and you can add a place name if you want to, if there isn't a name in the system that covers that. So then it's going to ask you 3 questions. The first one is, what aspects of the natural environment are relevant to this post? And so it's very general. It's meant to be for generalists at the community level. So I went ahead here and I clicked land mammals. Then it asks you, is there an unusual or unexpected event? How would you describe that? And I'm particularly proud of this little nod we put in here to Hitchcock and Demolic Acid. We also have added permafrost and pathogen, for example. And then, what is the impact on the human environment? So in this case, we've gone ahead and selected food security, but as you'll notice, we also have, for example, displacement, burial sites, and we keep adding these as people sort of demonstrate to us that there's topics that we haven't properly covered. And then you can submit it, and you can go ahead and submit it to yourself, or you can submit it to us, and then what happens is it comes in. This is actually kind of behind the curtain. This is my inbox, so I have 11 draft observations. I review it to make sure someone's just not playing with the system, make sure there's no spamming occurring or anything like that. But if it meets our basic criteria as being an observation about environmental change, we go ahead quite often and forward it to some other partner organization who can provide a detailed topical consult. So, for example, this is Victoria Kantongan. This is her profile on Leo. When she created her profile, she put in a bunch of information, but the only thing we show here is her community and her name. But you can contact her using almost a third-person email like Craigslist or some other site like that would have. She also gets her own map, so everything she puts on there will be tracked, as well as all of her collaborators and all of her content that she's put into the system. So Victoria, I'm going to talk a little bit about worms in grouse and ptarmigan. So she wrote, on Saturday the 6th and Sunday the 7th, I went grouse hunting up along the road to the White Alice site. On Saturday, I shot 6 spruce grouse and 2 ptarmigan. When I was cleaning the first grouse, I ripped out the breast, and there were worms squiggling around on top of the breast meat. 3 of the 6 grouse had these long, skinny worms on the meat. So we forwarded this to the Wildlife Toxicology Lab at UAF. They got in touch with Victoria. She sent the frozen samples. They were able to remove the worms, and this is what Todd writes. We necropsy 7 birds, and then we're going to send them on, and we put them in formalin and so forth. So you can see this conversation developing. And this is one of the great things about, if there's one thing I can say about the timing of climate change, I would say, thank God it happened during a time frame when we have technology, when we can have this kind of conversation. I think it's really important. So, incidentally, Victoria and Todd ended up working with Caroline, and they went ahead and published a paper, and Victoria was identified as a co-author. So it was a great sort of story all around. It happened that the worms were, it was the most northern and western record ever of those worms. And the good news for Victoria, for what she really wanted to know was, is it okay to eat the grouse? And we were able to say, yes, cook the grouse, it's okay to eat the grouse, it's okay to feed the grouse to your dog, and thank you for sharing that information for us. So that's really the end game that we're trying to get to. But you can see a few aspects of this. There's a summary, there's this dialogue occurring, there's a project we put this into, there is a reference where Victoria is the first author, there's a lat long, and then there's additional documents or associated posts that we can add into it. So once you have this content into the system, you can begin to do some detailed searches. So for example, how are we doing on time?
No, fine.
Okay. So for example, here I've gone into our detailed search window here, and I've just plugged in the word eroding, and I received 56 observations. And now what I can do is I can begin to filter that. So what kinds of features do you have for anecdotal observations? Well, we do have all of these categories that we went ahead and tagged when we initially put in the post, or the author initially put in the post. So we can filter it that way. We can also filter by time, and even get very specific, detailed time ranges. We can go ahead and designate a region. So in Alaska, we have tribal health regions, which are not normally seen on a map, but we have those all broken out as geofences. We also have Arctic, we also have Alaska, we have lots of different ways we can do that. So that's just more of a software exercise to put those in. And we can either look at all of the posts in the system, or we can just look at the observations or the news articles. And then there's a variety of ways you can look at the search results. So you can see it on a map. You can look at it on a chronological timeline. You can look at it into a presentation mode, or you can look at some different sorts of statistics that will tell you how it was cross-categorized, basically. So this is another observation that came in recently. I'd like to walk through it briefly because it comes back to our main topic for the meeting. So what can we see here? This was on October, what does it say? 30th? Thawing ground is sinking at historical mass burial site. You see the blue dot is the actual location of the observation. The other dot is a see also. So there's a adjoining community there, an adjacent community, Teller, that also posted in June about their gravesite erosion. We have a summary statement. We have the initial observation by Johnny Seatot. He said, the mass grave is just adjacent to the community grave site to the east, about 75 to 100 feet. At the mass grave site, the crosses are falling down, and when they get separated from the grave site, it's a big problem. And in the May grave site area, it's kind of the same situation happening. So then we look through our information that we have in our data set. We provide a little bit of an editorial consultation. We might add additional information. These are things that happen on our side. So what has the observer contributed? They've contributed the initial observation. That's a pretty short one. Some of them are longer. They've gone ahead and contributed these photos. This cross has actually fallen over. He's holding it up right here. Here's another one sinking. And it's interesting here to see also how the shrubs are growing up because this area is sinking. So it's creating a pond, and it's thawing faster and collecting more snow, which makes it thaw even faster. So Vladimir and I were talking about ways that you could do some caretaking of these sites to help protect the permafrost. And I think Vladimir is going to provide a consultation on that. And here's their other site, more of starting to have erosion, and these individual graves at the main cemetery are going to begin to have to be relocated. So here is Brevik Mission's actual community page. So this is sort of going back to the patient chart. So we have 7 observations. Here was one about blue mussel die-off that happened this summer. We have the members. We can go ahead and look in detail at any of these posts, but we also have some community-specific data. So this is basically shortcuts to their information that we found from really useful, different, mostly government websites, which can sometimes be hard to navigate. So what we add to their photos is a satellite image. Here's Breivik, here's Teller. We can add some really good aerial photograph that we have in our system. So here you actually can see the grave site, and this is the mass burial site with the cross line down. There's the cross line down right there. You can see this is a few years ago. We have their updated photos. We have some historic imagery. We add weather data. So what we can do is go ahead, and this is precipitation over temperature. So here we are, 2019. You can't quite see what's going on here, but what it's basically telling you is this is the warmest year on record, actually warmest year on record and one of the wettest years on record. So perhaps the perfect storm for permafrost when we're getting lots of precipitation and lots of warming at the same time. We can put consultation documentation. So this is the State of Alaska advisory that I was speaking about yesterday. Hopefully something like this will come out of this venue as well, out of this meeting, and I'd love to be able to add that in there as well as guidance for the community. And we even can put in some historical information. So this is Johan Holten's expedition in 1951 to the exact same location. That's the exact same two crosses. This is what was there before. Holten went in and excavated 7 feet down in the permafrost. It took him a week to do it, and removed lung tissue from some of the victims from the 1918 flu epidemic, which led to, I believe, one of the first Spanish influenza strain identification. So in the meantime, while this post is being reviewed and discussed, there is a back circle of conversation happening. So these are the people that we've included in the conversation. Hey. So here is James and Johnny. They are the authors. I'm providing some consultation here. Following along in the conversation, so they see all of the dialogue occurring, is Tom, who works for the Department of Military and Veteran Affairs. He works on cultural resources and grave sites. Anama, who works for the Regional Tribal Health Organization. Luisa works for the State Department of Health. And Rachel Lee is the Environmental Health Director for the region. We want to make sure the right people get this information and can take action on it if they need to. So that's the end of my Leo review.
2 more minutes.
Just a few more pictures from around the region. These are all communities that are located in the continuous permafrost zone, or what we think is the continuous permafrost zone of Alaska. Also, all communities that experience epidemics at one period or another during the course of Alaska's history. This is in Teller, really just across the bay from the community we were just looking at, Breivik. And you can see the proximity. This was actually a couple of years ago, this image. They're sending me some more now, but I think the line right now, you can see actually the thaw cracks occurring here. So when you see a thaw crack like that, you can basically say that's going to be gone this season, that's going to be gone the following season. This is in St. Michael. They have been actively collecting remains for about 6 years now. And in one instance, I was visiting the tribal council, and we were talking about this, and they discovered a box of bones that they had forgotten about that were down in the basement, and nobody came to work the next day because they were distressed that an ancestor had been left in the basement without being attended to. So, and this is where they are coming from. These are some of the crosses kind of eroding down the hill now. And I had to throw this picture in. This is from Point Hope. That's my son Ryan. We were doing a climate change assessment there a few years ago, and we were out in what's called Jabbertown, which is where the whaling community was outside of the main village. And we thought that was going to be a cellar, an ice cellar, until we opened it up, and I got the picture of his great expression on his face. So that's actually that's a whaling grave, and when they used to bury on top of the permafrost in the old days.
So this is just showing how some of these different posts about thawing burial sites are rolling up into the platform so that we can visualize them. And if you go in and look, so this is just in a map that I made of thawing permafrost sites. You can see here that you can start to look, okay, so most of these burial sites, there's not very many yet in there, but over time you'll have more. But most of them are being primarily categorized as permafrost rather than erosion, but erosion's right in there well. Cultural impact, health impact, these are the kinds of things that people are tagging along with it. Now, another thing we do with Leo is we will pick local newspapers and then we'll run these queries and those run automatically. So that's something you can do too, is sort of tailor your own search so that you're getting updates. And so thank you for my team. That's us, my team at Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. I wanted to say thank you to the primary funders that have supported us. And I want to also say thank you to the host and organizer of this terrific conference. And that's it.